Hey there, fellow entrepreneurs. I'm Sue, and you've just stepped into Entrepreneurs Gone Wild. Every week, I'll introduce you to a friend of mine, a remarkable entrepreneur who's not just changing the world, but also harnessing a secret weapon, time outdoors. Together, we'll dive into their journey, unpack invaluable business advice, and discover why embracing the wild is not just good for the soul, but also a goldmine for inspiration and innovation. Ready to uncover the secret that's boosting bottom lines and fueling joy? Hit subscribe and join us in the wild. Welcome back to Entrepreneurs Gone Wild. I'm so glad you're here. This is going to be so cool. I want to introduce you to my new friend, Traci, and we're going to hear all about her story. And she has been somewhere very, very cool or hot, depending on exactly where you are. But Traci, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. Would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely, Sue. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Traci Austin, and I am the founder of Elevated Talent Consulting. I'm located in Wisconsin, and it's beautiful, right? As you can see, we have the afternoon sun today. That is just an amazing thing, especially after not seeing it for so long.
Oh, yeah. I would be like all in that like a cat. So I'm really excited. This is so cool. So many of the entrepreneurs that we talk to here, like a lot of them in e-com, a lot are in service businesses. It's a great mix. So I'm always excited to hear. I love business. It's so cool to just see how did this start? What are you doing? How did you get this idea? I've got a lot of questions.
Perfect.
Why don't you take us back to how did you get the entrepreneurial bug in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that there's something about wanting to put your thumbprint on things. And, for me, that is definitely true. We use something called the predictive index in our business. And, I am a reference profile called a maverick, which essentially is an outside the box thinker that wants to put your thumbprint on things. So, I think with so many things, there's things that are ingrained with what our work styles and our behaviors are. And I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it is a lot of those same traits.
It really is. So how old were you? What hit you? What was that first instance where you're like, business?
Yeah, well, so I've been in human resources, really building HR departments from the ground up my entire career. And I was in nonprofits for 10 years and then shifted into long-term care, took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and got my nursing home administrator license and then went into consulting. And with that, what I really saw in consulting was, oh my gosh, it is amazing how we can have such a significant impact on folks, especially I really saw a gap in the market for nonprofit organizations, knowing that was the background that I had stepped out of, but also small businesses really under those 20 employees. And, so much of HR can be compliance based. And at that point in time, it was really, hey, where's that gap between truly, having folks be fulfilled in their roles? And as leaders, we have an obligation to create that container for our staff to be fulfilled. And so that was the gap that I saw that I stepped into.
I love that. That's fantastic because it's like you're bridging those two worlds. You've got the entrepreneurs and it's like, we can't do it all on our own. We think we can.
And we're not good at it.
We can't. And then you've got the employees and they're looking for entrepreneurs that they can help, and work with. So you really are kind of like in between both worlds. That's kind of cool. So what was that like for you when you first, what did you take as your first step into, all right, this is it. I'm doing this.
Yeah. And I think that for everyone, it's different, right? And so much of it depends upon, hey, what is the job that you're in? And can you truly step out within that job and do it as a side gig for a while? I couldn't necessarily do that based on the role that I was in. So when I essentially went all in with it and really just started offering one-to-one HR consulting services that really morphed into the training programs that we have today. And so today, the majority of the work that we're doing is coaching for HR managers and mid-level HR folks inside of organizations, training programs for leaders, and then really working with organizations that are growing incredibly fast, a lot of PE and venture-backed organizations, to say, hey, if you don't have a strong foundation when you go to grow, you're going to amplify whatever's there. So if it's amazing, you're going to amplify the amazingness. And if it's not, because, as a small organization, typically that HR infrastructure does not get built very well. It's typically somebody voluntold or, Bobby Sue's brother's sister's wife's daughter that's doing HR, right?
It's true. It's so true. And I know, I've worked with clients and I've had jobs before where there was no HR department. So it was kind of like you said, somebody got voluntold. There's no onboarding. There's no offboarding. There's no boarding of anything. Like you just like kind of everybody's doing it yourself. So I'm sure you run into that.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, absolutely. And so really, with that being said, that kind of passion for me is really, how do I give that value back so that we can build it inside of the organization and really take people data and have that back, what we're doing with our people in a way that really elevates them into the role that they were created to be in.
Yeah. Oh man, that's exciting because you can really, so many people have so much fulfillment from their job, but it's got to be a good fit. And I know, for employers, it's got to be a good fit too. They don't want to be babysitting. They want, it's a whole thing. So.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like every single person is created perfectly the way they are. They are not created perfectly for every job, and we are not created perfectly for every culture. And so it's really important that we define what it is that we mean when we're recruiting folks. And we really define, what does it mean to be in a hybrid workforce? What does hybrid mean to our organization? What is our culture, and how do we define those behaviors as lived values? I just had an individual on my podcast. His name is Jeff Mold. And Jeff, I love this quote. He goes, Traci, we say all the time that if it is on the wall, it must be down the hall. And I mean, if you think about that, those values must be lived in every single employee's day-to-day behavior. Otherwise, why are we doing it?
That's intense. When you first started this, did you kind of straddle two worlds where you had a job and you started on the side?
No, I did for this. I didn't, because I was consulting, and that would have been seen as a conflict of interest.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So, Yep.
So, wow, you just kind of you went all in head first.
I did. Yep.
What was that experience like?
Yep. It's like, all right, let's make this thing happen. And this is what we're going to do. So, yeah.
That's great. Were there moments where you're like, oh crap, what have I done? When you're just starting, or?
There are so many of those, right? There's definitely so many of those. And it's really looking at it and saying, all right, my greatest stretch happens, my greatest growth happens in those moments that we're like, what is happening?
Yeah, I bet. Now, was it, did you have, was it like an adjustment? Did you have to, did you have friends, family that are like, what are you doing, Traci? Was it, was there a lot of...
There's always that, right? I mean, because you go from something that's safe, right? I mean, a job, especially in our culture, is seen as incredibly safe. And it's going, okay, what are we creating here? Am I just creating a job for myself? Or am I creating, a company and a team that really has an impact on those that we're serving? So, when you make that shift, it's really looking at those key items.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure, there is all of that, and it's wild what you're doing. I'm just so blown away where it's like, your entrepreneurism is taking shape in other people having being an employee. It's really, you really get what both sides of this equation are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what's really fun about working with private equity backed businesses is the fact that most of the folks that now are getting private equity really started out as this entrepreneur. They might be serial entrepreneurs, but most of them aren't. And, so they figure out this thing that they're doing incredibly well. Now, all of a sudden, an influx of cash comes in. Well, that can be a really good thing or a really bad thing. And again, we're going to amplify what's already inside of our business.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, a lot of the people that are in Entrepreneurs Gone Wild, we've got some who have exited, had a massive, 7-8 figure exit massive in our, in the e-com world, in the small business startup type of world, not billions not the 100, but, and that's a huge thing for them to go from, hey, I have this idea, I think I could solve this problem, to all of a sudden now massive. It's, they've got teams, they've got, all this, and then private equity comes in and it's yet another business. So it's
absolutely. And it's so much of what we look at when what we're building out is, what are the very specific goals that you have, right? Like, so what are the goals? And if you all of a sudden have private equity backed, now all of a sudden we're taking those goals and we're going to accelerate them incredibly fast. Well, that acceleration of goals, we can only move as fast as the people inside of our business are willing to move, and truly can move based on the skill sets that they have and based on how they're managed and led. And that's really where we come in and say, hey, let's really take a look at those, 4 drivers of engagement. And when we look at those 4 drivers of engagement, really what we're solving for is we're solving for the gap between the have to curve and the want to curve, right?
Tell me more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you ever been in a role or had somebody in your business that's been in a role that is just like they're at work because they have to be there? They're not putting out any discretionary effort. It's just like, it's like Eeyore. I'm going to do what I have to do and I'm going to show up and I have to be here and I don't want to be here, but I'm going to do the bare minimum to get us to where you have to go.
I think I know that.
No, we don't want those people in our business, right? Yeah. Like the people we want are the folks that are like, I want to be here. I see something that needs to change. I see how I can get there and let's go. Right? Like that is what we want, because we're going to drive innovation. We're going to be able to grab the Eeyores on our team and be like, let's go. Right? And so, but guess what? There's 4 levers of engagement that we find that are essentially pulled between that. And the first one is, are you in the right job? I don't know about you, Sue, but I've definitely been in a wrong job in my career over time, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I started out my career and I did payroll. Okay, I'm not a crazy detail-oriented person. And now I'm like, I won't do payroll. Like, I'll poke my eyes out with needles before I'm going to do payroll. I'm not going to do it, right? Yet at that time, even though it wasn't a natural fit for my behaviors, I did it because I was so eager to learn. And I was at a season of life where I was going, I want to learn all the things to get to the next level. And I'm willing to do it for a short period of time. Yeah. So that season of life plays a huge role in how those levers are going to be adjusted and played with. So the first one is fit to role. Am I in the right role based on my natural behaviors and my cognitive ability? I mean, that's a really important thing.
Sure.
And then that second one is really looking at, hey, am I being led the way that I need to be? Or is somebody leading me either the way they've been led in the past or the way they need to be led, right? So, for example, I am somebody that I need a little bit of direction, but, don't start moving my cheese around. Don't start telling me what to do. Don't start giving me a ton of constraints. And yet I work incredibly well under pressure, right? Now, if I am, supervising and leading someone on my team who's incredibly detail-oriented and process-oriented, and I need her because that is not my strength, and I'm sending her a Slack message every 3 minutes. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Hey, I know you've got time blocked right now, but can you quick shift and do this? I'm going to drive her batty crazy. So I'm not leading her the way she needs to be led.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, I want to hear the other 2, but I also have questions on this.
Yeah. And that's why I paused, because I'm
Okay. So with that, all right, if you're the maverick type and you've got somebody who's very detail oriented, and that's, you can't lead them the way that you would like to be led, but that's the way that you know how to lead. So what do you do?
Yeah. And this is where I'm a huge proponent of people data. There's lots out there. I have my preference, but there's lots out there. So, we use predictive index. However, there's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all the things, right? So as soon as I start naming that, you're like, oh yeah, there's all the things. Again, I use predictive index because it's validated for hire and they have amazing team aspects to it. And the reports are phenomenal. But with that being said, I can spit out a report that is a management strategy guide report that'll essentially say, this is how Sue needs to be led. And then the next page says, essentially, self-reflection, Traci, how are you doing leading Sue? And I go, Well, the first thing I'm going to do is say, hey, Sue, take a look at this. Is this the way you need to be led? And you're going to go, yep. Not really that one. So then I'm not going to pay attention to that one. And it's things like, provides autonomy in their work, or gives very detailed instructions so that they can execute on it, gives them the time to execute the work without interruption, right? It's things that they need based on how their natural behavioral drives are. And so, I'm going to ask that you, Sue, hey, what does this look like for you? And then I'm going to look and say, hey, these are the 3 areas I think I'm doing great. And these are the 3 areas that I could probably work on over the next 3 months. And we're going to see, are we aligned or not? Now, guess what? We've turned a one-on-one from a one-way conversation into a 2-way conversation, because yes, I have impact on your ability to be successful at work.
That's really cool. So it's just conversation. How about that?
It is. It's conversation grounded in a common language with very defined definitions around what things mean.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And I'm shifting gears because like in a very tiny organization, so let's say, it's just you and me, that would be hard for you to shift how I'm going to lead my employee. When there's a bigger organization, there are more managers. Do we shift into, okay, Joe, you're great at this, you're going to manage her.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 things here. So one is how we're leading another person, which to me, it's not really about the size of the organization. It's more about being self-aware for what they need. And then, kind of naming, hey, this is where we can meet each other in the middle on what those things are. And then what I heard you kind of stepping into is essentially, what does the team need? So when we look at the teams that we're on, what is the strategy that team is executing? And then, hey, what are the strengths of each of us on the team? So I'm going to take a sales team. And the reason being, one, it's the easiest to describe, but it's also one that we can all kind of wrap our heads around. And if we look at a sales team, there are some sales folks that are really, really good at going to every single networking event, and they love it. And they're going to go out and they're going to talk to every single person in the room. And then they're going to go 2 inches deep. They're going to get enough information. It's going to fill them up. They're socially oriented. They love it. They're not necessarily detail oriented, and the follow through is not quite there all the time, right? Yeah. So they're going to come back to the office. Will they log that in the CRM? Maybe not. Will they follow up with them? Maybe not. So they just went out and got those 72 names, but what's really hard for them is the paperwork side and the follow-up side, because they're really good in conversation. And now we've got another group of sales folks that, so that's our hunter group. We've got a farmer group, and then we definitely have the ones that are in the middle, right? But if we look at our farmers are, if I'm going to air quote that, our farmers are the folks that are going, I really don't love going to networking events. And when I do, even though there's 72 people in the room, I'm going to talk to 2 or 3 and I'm going to go really deep with them. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to send them the most impactful, email follow-up that essentially states, hey, here's exactly what I heard. Let's follow up. There's a plan and a strategy there. And guess what? They're going to close those 2 or 3 leads. Whereas this other one that had those 72 leads may also close 2 or 3 leads. But guess what? We're missing the strengths within that versus playing, most of the time what happens is we play whack-a-mole on folks' weaknesses. Well, why didn't you go out and meet more people? Well, why didn't you follow up on them all? Versus looking at it and saying, how do we strategically create teams within our organizations to really turn up the strengths and say, hey, why don't you 2 partner together on this? And you know what? From an HR and compensation policy, instead of giving bonuses individually, we're going to give bonuses based on pods. But we're going to very thoughtfully put our pods together to turn up the strengths. Yeah. And when we do that, the results that we've seen with the clients that we work with is that they give out more bonuses than they gave out previously, because now what's happening is our sales folks aren't competing against other sales folks on their teams. Now they're actually competing with the organization across the street.
Wow. Is this new? I mean, it seems like before business was kind of like, you fit into this box or you're out, right? And so like to have people collaborating like that, and like, in a sense, like two people doing, it's not two people doing one person's job. It's two people.
No, not at all.
Not at all. And it's more effective. Like you said, they're giving more bonuses like this. Is this kind of a new idea, or is this?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's a new idea, but what I will say is this harder to implement from a leadership perspective. Yeah. And so like predictive index has been around since 1955. Is this new technology? No. Okay. Now, are we having more conversations around the technology? Are we having more conversations about behavioral profiles and strengths and, empowering our staff? Absolutely. Is some of that changing because the generation coming into the workforce right now says, no, I'm not going to do it that way? Absolutely. And here's the deal. When we have folks that are crispy at work, they're not performing at their best. And I think that gets into, how do you play outside, right? Like, what are those things? And so when we work folks so much that we don't have the balance, we're creating an imbalance, which means